Welcome to the Townsend Institute Podcast Series, Tips, a show produced by the Townsend Institute at Concordia University, Irvine. This podcast provides tips into leadership, coaching, and counseling topics aimed at helping listeners grow in both their personal and professional lives. I'm Dr. John Townsend, psychologist, organizational consultant, and author of over 30 books, including the New York Times best-selling Boundaries series. I'm also the founder of the Townsend Institute, and I'm excited to introduce your podcast hosts, Townsend Institute Program Directors Dr. Ashley Andrew and Dr. Gilbert Fugit.
Today's episode is a bittersweet one for those of us here at the Townsend Institute as we interview our outgoing dean, Dr. Mike Shurance. He has worked in higher education for nearly 2 decades, earning his EDD from right here at Concordia, Irvine. He's been perhaps the most tech-savvy member of our leadership team, having spent many years working in information technology. Perhaps it is this background, paired with his innovative leadership skills and vision, that has helped him shepherd our Townsend team, one that spans the entire country with 5 geographic time zones. Gilbert, what else can you tell us about Dean Shurance?
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, Dean Shurance and his wife, Stephanie, reside in Orange County, California, with their 5 children. Together, they helped coin the term connection, which now serves as the 3rd C in our 3C model here at the Institute. We pray for Mike's success as he prepares for a new role outside Concordia, and are thankful we got a chance to sit down and talk to him about his experience leading virtual teams. So, here we go. Good to see you, Mike. We're so glad you are here today. Join us on the Townsend Institute podcast. So, can you start, as we're going to talk about remote teams today, and you are leading us here, Ashley and I, and the rest of our great folks in the Townsend Institute. What's the makeup of our remote team that you do lead?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast, guys. Congratulations on getting this started. Looking forward to seeing the wonderful results of exposing new leadership ideas and growing the Institute as we get a chance to discuss the ever-changing landscape of leadership. So appreciate the time to come and share some thoughts. Regarding our team, at Townsend, we are pretty much almost all deployed. We have a national program, right? A national higher education program with master's degrees and PhD and a bachelor's. So the whole suite of higher education. But our team is pretty much a deployed team, except for a few that reside in California. And of those, a couple are local and can kind of come into the office. But even those that have a traditional workspace here, we still have what we call like a hybrid version of the workplace. Gilbert, you yourself, right? Only come in a couple days a week. So this isn't something where we have people here Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 in your traditional workspace. Our team is very unique that way. And because of that, we've been able to do a lot of things and reach new talent pools and a lot of advantages that have come from having a national program that's led by a national faculty and national leadership. So it's been good. And we've pretty much had this since the beginning. So I know that a lot of people have converted from the pandemic, and we could probably talk through that as we get there. But Townsend Institute was always a dynamic kind of team. So we always had this as our ethos, as our culture from the beginning. And it really helps when you don't have to convert people to that philosophy, that these people that you hire understand that and they appreciate that. And it becomes really a benefit for them when they're deciding whether or not I want to come work in this kind of organization or not. And I said earlier, we get to attract a different pool because of it. So for us, it was a little easier building this remote team and keeping it as a remote team because, again, we started that way. Whereas some that have to convert or migrate over, it takes a little bit more effort for them. But it's been a good thing so far, and looking forward to continue growing this team.
That's awesome, Mike. I think it's interesting for our listeners to know that we here at the Townsend Institute, this isn't necessarily new for us. Over the last couple of years, as you mentioned, this has been the ethos and the experience of being a primarily deployed team since its inception. So another question for you. Do you think our experience is typical of most other deployed teams out there? I know you read and research a little bit about things going on in other industries. What does a typical deployed team kind of look like?
That's a good question. It's a hard question because I'm not sure there is a typical remote team. So I've been working in remote fashion probably since 2009 in some capacity or another. And probably actually before that, when I think about my business background and things I was doing, but at least in higher ed, since 2009, I've been working in a remote fashion. And to say that there's a typical version of that is probably not accurate at all, because every culture kind of does it differently, and every culture, particularly back in 09, 10, 11, received that kind of work a little differently than maybe they would now. At the time, it was seen like, oh, you're working at home, you're not actually working, or there was a lot of sometimes jealousy that, oh, you get to work out of your home. Other times it was, you can't really be working if you're not here. So there's a big change there, and so it depends on the culture you're coming into, how the remote work is received. For us, I would say we're not typical in the sense that, one, we started this way and it's our ethos, so that's kind of unique. But two, I hopefully try to lead this from the top, that I value results only work environments, in the sense that I value hiring the best people and giving them the tools they need, helping create a vision, and then letting them do their best work. And that, I think, is very helpful in a remote team, where it's less about management and it's more about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to manage anybody I work with. I want to help lead them and let their best work come forward. And so I think that's a very important thing in a remote team, is the ability to trust the people you work with and say, I know they're doing what they're going to be doing. And then you gauge it based on results, not so much, what we call time in the seat. So it's hard to say, like I said, a typical team. There isn't really one. So it's a bit of a hard question.
Definitely. I love what you mentioned there, though. Less about management and more about leadership. That's great.
Yeah, it's funny because you think about the Industrial Revolution and how that changed work, and it really took people out of the home, right? Where people were at home making shoes or sewing and doing these things, or working the farm, and it brought them into these big factory systems. Thank you, Henry Ford, and all that he did, and with the Model T, and was able to get the car down to really cheap at the time. I think it was a couple $100 at the end, when their production was so fast. The huge changes that the Industrial Revolution did. But what that did was require everybody start at a certain time and end at a certain time, right? Because if I turn a wrench on this thing and pass it down to Gilbert over there, and he turns a wrench, passes over to you, Ashley, you have to have everyone working at the same time. And what we've seen in the information economy and the way things are changing now is this idea of an industrial model is no longer necessary for us to get work done. And because of that, we need to be able to break out of this, in my opinion, 9 to 5, everyone there at the same time kind of idea that is maybe no longer the best way to be productive. If Henry Ford were to look at, or anybody really, to look at our modern way of doing work, what is the most productive way to do work is probably not, let's have the factory whistle blow and we all take the same break at 12 and we all come back at 1. So I think that is shift we're seeing is pushing remote work, and people are starting to understand, I can actually get some stuff done remotely, and sometimes I'm more efficient in a remote environment because I have less distractions. So it's an interesting development we're seeing. I'm fascinated with it, where it's going, and I do think that we'll have a chance to hopefully have a little more work-life balance, where you can manage your life around work, where it's not, I've got to put everything personal aside, go to work, and then come back. They can kind of be more integrated, like they might have been pre-industrial revolution, where I'm on the farm and I'm coming in for lunch and then I go back out and farm, or I'm doing something in the garage. And so the idea that work and life can integrate better, I think, is where we're headed.
I was going to call you a pioneer, Mike, because you did remote work before Zoom existed, but actually you're wanting to, we're going back to maybe before, the Industrial Revolution. We're kind of going back to our roots almost. It just kind of changes the outlook of what we're doing. And so you led a team since before the pandemic, before COVID hit. I'm assuming, though, that the events of the last couple years, almost 3 years, a little while, it feels like, still influenced you? How so?
So it's a hard question because personally, what I think happened for me, if you say influence me, is the reality of burnout became more cognizant of me because everything was on Zoom now. Everything became a virtual meeting, and we all went back to back to back to back and running from one meeting to the other, and there was no separation. So as I just went on this discussion of this semi-utopia idea where everything will integrate really well, there is a counter side to that where it's very hard for a lot of people to turn off work when you're working at home all the time, right? You're checking your email at 10 o'clock at night or 4 in the morning, and the lines of separation, which we talk about at the Institute, right, get a little blurred about when I need to put in strict boundaries and things like that. And I think the pandemic for me, I realized that my own kind of boundaries were being pushed and the team boundaries were being pushed. And I could really feel that burden that people had about the team about, they could just tell the stress was very high because you're always on, and it was very difficult to feel a break from that. And of course that was exacerbated the fact that we couldn't go outside or things were shut down, so there was this cramped feeling anyway upon our lives. So maybe we just retreated to doing more at work, but that certainly was one thing personally that has affected it. At the Institute, it didn't really affect the way we do business here because, like I said, fortunately we were already remote. We were already in kind of a flexible scenario. So for us, we rolled really well with the pandemic. We didn't have to do very many changes at all. I think it actually helped us weather that as an institute a lot better than some of the other, even the local Concordia schools had a little more difficult time transitioning their teaching online and just being able to work online. And that has changed a little bit, but the Institute, we kind of weathered it pretty good. What I have noticed, and it's actually very beneficial, is that it feels like the pandemic pushed up the adoption of remote work and particularly Zoom or other technologies, probably a decade, maybe more, to where grandmas are now FaceTiming with little grandkids, and people have a baseline level of technology and familiarity and comfort with digital tools that didn't exist pre-pandemic, even though the tools were around and they were pretty solid, right? We transitioned into Zoom pretty quick, and it wasn't for lack of infrastructure. There was just no need to. But we're definitely seeing this, that students are coming in with a much more familiarity, but even mastery of some of these tools. They don't need to be brought up to speed on how do I do Zoom, or how do I work in a remote environment? How do I connect with somebody over the computer? So that, I think, has changed our baseline for students, and hopefully we can take that and now pivot into like the next levels of engagement, because for a long time that was a barrier of, are people going to be able to handle the tools and those things? But now essentially everyone knows how to write, right? They or do video. We all have this ability to communicate in this space now, so we can move forward and start doing some fun things. So that's probably the biggest change as far as like our institutional things that we're seeing, is that people are coming in with a better understanding.
I agree 100%, Mike. I mean, I think we've lessened that digital divide. There's been so much research on that, and sure, there's still going to be some out there, especially, considering, geographic elements and stuff. But the generational piece, like you mentioned, the ages, that's very real. A lot less of that. And I've worked alongside you and Gilbert for quite a few years here now. And we've worked in the higher ed realm, and it used to be a very real thing, this learning curve of people coming back to school and being nervous and sometimes just downright fearful of online education. And how do I submit an assignment online? And what's this discussion board thing mean? And, I'm watching videos instead of, a professor in front of me. And like you said, it seems to be less and less of that now. So that's obviously a great thing. I would like to know, this is kind of a two-part question here, your biggest triumph in leading a remote team, and also your biggest challenge.
questions. Let me think through that for a minute. I'll tell you the biggest challenge is tends to be, and I think you kind of hinted at it earlier as far as the time frame is getting a meeting where everyone can be there at the same time. So we have people at different time zones. At one point, we had somebody in Hawaii and Florida. So we were spanning 6 time zones and trying to, I don't know, balance their work-life stuff, right? Because if we don't want to do something too late, because then on the East Coast, it's late at night, and we still kind of deal with that. So for finding a time that works for everyone is tends to be probably the biggest challenge, because although we have our base home time of Pacific Standard Time, there are more of us on different time zones than actually on Pacific Standard Time. So when you're trying to set up something that makes sense for the most people, you can't always do Pacific Standard Time. So there are times I get up actually pretty early to meet with people. Sometimes I'm doing stuff at 7 a.m. our time because it's already 10. So just being flexible and trying to figure out different time zones. This is something that isn't brand new for industry, but I think it's becoming more commonplace of a problem to deal with for deployed teams. This may have been something that the bigger or or corporations had to deal with at some point with their international, but even the smaller teams have now people in different time zones. So scheduling can be a little bit more difficult when you're trying to balance everybody's requirements and when we can all get together. But it can be overcome, right? It requires some flexibility from everyone. The biggest triumph probably certainly with Townsend and probably in most of my remote has been the culture we've been able to facilitate and to develop here. John always likes to say that, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think he took that from, I can't remember, Gilbert, you might know the original quote is, but it's still a good quote, right?
Peter Drucker.
Drucker, that's right. Yeah. Drucker said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that's something that has been very heavy on our mind since the beginning of Townsend, that we have to build a culture that can not only sustain, but thrive with remote teams. And so I think we've done a really good job as a team. And this is not my win. This is the team win. The team has very much stepped up and decided that they all want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And none of them want to be stuck in their little office by themselves, focused on their own thing. We are all engaged in this bigger mission and truly the bigger vision of what Townsend can be. And everyone wants a dynamic culture. So that's one of our biggest wins. And that's done through a number of ways. First is you hire right? You get the people who know the importance of culture and they desire to be a part of something that is bigger than themselves. So you get the right people and with the right dispositions who understand how to work remote and are at least willing to learn. The second is obviously having a strong vision, which everyone can be around and rally around. This is what we're all trying to focus on. This is the kind of thing that we are trying to build, and we're desirous of the same thing. So it keeps us on the same page. The third is intentionality. You really got to be intentional, right? You have to plan for what I call the water cooler moments. Think about the average office, right? There's a lot that happens, the interaction in the water cooler space, the transitional space, the time we just bump into people and you have that organic conversation, that is very powerful and not to be dismissed. And in a remote team, it's not something you have. So you have to be intentional about building that kind of time for just reflection, time for just getting to know each other. And we try to do this in our meetings, in our school meetings. We do fun activities, sometimes silly examples of times to connect, and it's not business. It really is just hanging out. We've done virtual scavenger hunts where we I think it was in teams that time, and the teams came together and I went around their house and tried to find things. And we did one that was spring cleaning. I think I had people go in and find something that you want to get rid of and then share it with everyone and throw it away on camera, if I remember right. And then one time I had people take pictures of their own office from a different angle, right? So usually you see just the camera, and whatever's staged on your camera is what you see. But I had everyone take a picture of things we don't see.
That just created office envy, though, Mike.
Yeah, I did, because we had somebody with a fireplace.
Yeah.
And I was definitely envious
Yeah.
of the fireplace. But it is interesting to see somebody's home office, and I enjoy going into people's offices here and noticing what's on the wall, and makes conversation. So these intentional pieces are meant to kind of facilitate, okay, how do we engage and communicate with each other and build around a camaraderie of getting to know people. At the end of the day, and Gilbert and Ash, you guys know this, you're organizational leadership, but the best thing you can do is build people. And an organization at the end of the day is just a group of people trying to do something together, and hopefully their heart's in it. And if you don't spend the time building camaraderie with people, and you guys know our values, the foundational value is trust, right? And trust comes through spending time with each other and getting to know each other and being vulnerable, as Brene Brown talks about. And if you don't develop the people and that trust, none of it's going to matter. So it takes some intentionality. And the last thing I would say that is important for us particularly is we try to meet at least once a year. So remote teams shouldn't be 100% remote. If they can, they should meet once in a while together face to face. And although primarily we're remote, we try to bring all the faculty, all the staff together at least once. And I've tried to, it hasn't worked out all the time, but we try to have everyone meet at a conference once a year as well. Because there is something about the physical interactions and the just being around each other and picking up on certain kind of mannerisms and just being around in a different capacity than the two-dimensional screen. That is important. So remote teams, I would say, and has gone a long way for our culture win, is having times where you can get together and see each other in the flesh, as it were, and shake hands and laugh together and maybe have a meal or two together, which we like to do. That definitely helps building culture. So those are my two. Ashley, again, scheduling is kind of difficult. It tends to be a trouble for us to find sometimes. And then culture, building a good culture is a win, and something that anybody doing remote teams should work on is culture as a primary function of growth.
And Mike, so thank you so much. It really kind of encapsulates what Townsend Institute's about, is the trust and things. But so much research has happened, just kind of exploded with the pandemic. And so, the Harvard Business Review, Forbes, they've published several articles on tips and trends. What's some research that you've read that you've liked?
Yeah, I think you've mentioned a bunch of them, and I think it's actually hard. It's hard to answer this question because it's coming. Research is coming out all the time, right? So the pandemic really did give us a huge case study, multiple case studies of remote work and what it's doing, and we're now trying to understand it a little bit better. And so what's most interesting to me from the research is how the workforce does not want to go back to what it was before. Now, what it looks like is still a bit murky. There are some people that, I think there was a study not 3-4 months ago that basically says 74% of companies plan to shift permanently to some kind of remote work or some kind of flexible arrangement. And we're seeing that even employees don't want to go back, right? They're talking about, I think it was a Newswire article, I'd have to look it up for you, but 80% of US workers would turn down a job that didn't have some kind of flexibility. So although the research is coming out, and it's kind of fascinating to watch, what appears to be a pattern is that nobody wants to go back to pre-pandemic work environment. Now, I shouldn't say nobody, because there are, I suppose, some out there that would say that was better. But it appears that the vast majority said there's some real benefit to having flexibility in my work-life balance, and remote work is a big part of that. And I won't do anything that doesn't have some kind of remote work experience. So the research is ongoing. I think there are 4 major things that are developing as far as what remote work does that are kind of pushing this as a future that we need to be adopting. Reduced operating costs or something companies are seeing, their ability to downsize some offices that they just don't need. So it's just cheaper. The increased productivity is is obvious. The research is showing that people are more productive at home. I think it was equivalent to 1 day a month extra when you work at home. There's improved employee retention rates we're seeing. And we've seen this a lot internally at the university, and particularly Townsend, that people will take, they're moving because we're seeing a big migration in patterns of where people live, but they're able to continue to work for us because we offer remote work. So we've been able to retain good talent because we have these flexible arrangements. So retention is higher, and then we have a better chance of hiring better, a better pool of possible employees because we can fish a bigger pond, right? We have some amazing faculty who would never be able to move to California. They just can't relocate. They wouldn't be able to upstate their whole lives, but they are phenomenal teammates, team members. They contribute so much, but that wouldn't be possible without remote work. So those kind of four main things, right? Reduce cost, productivity, retention, and getting the new talent are kind of areas that are emerging as results of what a remote workforce will do.
And like you said, new research coming out every day, because really, in the grand scheme of things, we're still kind of living through this. Mike, our next question has to do with, I'm thinking about our listeners out there who have maybe just recently been promoted to a leadership role in their organization, supervisor role, you name it. And now they're kind of thrown into this new role with a remote or deployed team. What would be just a couple pieces of advice you would give them on how to tackle that the first few days or weeks in this new role?
Yeah, it's a good question, because usually if you're thrown into this, you're dealing with a lot going on. So it's hard to manage all that at once. So I would say the first, probably most important thing is to listen to your people. You have to really, I kind of hinted this earlier, but it really is all about the people, and you've got to make the intentional time to connect with them. If you're not doing one-on-ones with your people, your directs, you really should. And you should probably, if you think you're over communicating, you're probably doing okay, because we tend to think the message is being shared more than it might be. So it's probably a good idea to set up some regular kind of meetings where you're intentional about doing that. And a lot of the things that you want to do aren't always business, right? I've said this a little bit earlier, but you're kind of doing little check-ins and how are we doing? And our leadership team does this, as you guys know, where we kind of do a high-low of how everybody's doing and get a chance to just connect with people and see how they're doing. So that would be the first thing, is make sure your people are doing okay, because if they're not okay, none of it's going to be balanced. The second is set up a regular kind of schedule, and this kind of goes with the first one, but even for yourself, because as I hinted at earlier, having boundaries and setting in proper, like, I need breaks and I need to be able to keep things from taking over my life is a real thing. And back to the research thing we were talking about, this is an area that I think we need probably some more research on, is the burnout that might come from this. So if we aren't thoughtful about how we do remote work, we're going to see, I think, a major backlash in overwork and burnout in that space as well. So you have to, when you're managing team, check in with your people, but also establish yourself a schedule of, these are kind of my guide rails of my own time. Don't feel like you have to be on all the time. My personal life, I actually about 6 months ago decided to leave my phone downstairs now to charge. So I had this bad habit of checking email at night and sometimes early in the morning, first thing sometimes, right? Which is really not a good thing. There's actually some pretty good research on all that, but I had to physically put it downstairs so it charges downstairs, and not having it near me. One, I can't check it, but two, I think it's a cognitive, subconscious thing that I know it's not there, so I don't have to think about it. So now when I go into the bedroom, there's no computer, there's no iPad, there's no phone. It really is a little bit of a sanctuary for me to be able to step away. So that's another thing. And then, invest in the equipment you need. If you're going to be doing remote work, don't try to do it with some old equipment or things that don't get the job done. Just like you have a traditional desk and everything else, get a good monitor. Microsoft has a whole division that talks about productivity in the workplace. And the number one thing they always talk about is your most productive tool you can get is a bigger monitor, right? So invest in a bigger monitor, invest in a decent camera, probably a good one. Consider your staging, right? What's behind you and that kind of stuff. Get good audio, the basics that we kind of think about and know. It's actually really important when you're setting up a completely remote environment to have a functional space that you can easily get on meetings and not have to fight the technology all the time and be frustrated. I've spent significant amount of money setting up my own personal space that's kind of turnkey. I can come in and just set up and go. I don't have to do a lot of prep work, but it's really important if you're trying to communicate and engage online that you have the right equipment. And of course, there's always the tips about, your camera and, don't be looking down at the camera. Don't be looking up, those kind of things, always good to look up and figure out how to communicate online. But certainly you want to invest in good equipment. So, take care of your people, take care of yourself, and invest in the equipment. Even though you're working from home, put in the time to get a good setup, and it'll make a big difference.
Mike, that's a good point. My wife and I had to have a difficult conversation because my office students started telling me my curtains look like shower curtains. And so I had to have a talk and say, I think we need to switch out the curtains, not knowing how emotionally attached she was to those curtains. So we negotiated for a while and have different curtains now. And she even admitted she likes how they look. So there you go. Okay, so I want to switch gears for just a second and talk a little bit about the Townsend Institute. Okay. So it was founded with both competence and character in mind. Two pillars, that remain foundational to who we are. Dr. Townsend has been talking about that for a long time. However, when you became dean, you said, you know what? I think we need to add another C to the mix. So can you elaborate on our third C that we have?
Sure. So it came kind of as a philosophical discussion I was having with myself about, ethos, pathos, and logos, and the idea that there's these three pillars. And I always understood that the Townsend Institute, we were really big on engagement and understanding how to connect with people. And so I was trying to come up with, okay, we have got the mind part, right? We've got the competency, we got the character part, but there was always something that just felt like it was missing, because that was part of the differentiation of who we are. We're really not just about giving you the skill sets, and we're really not just about growing you up. We really want to do this whole thing with you and build something around that. So that's kind of the genesis of it. And I was kicking ideas around for a long time about what is it? Is it engagement? I couldn't come up with it. And I was sharing this with my wife. Actually, I don't know if anybody knows this story, but I was sharing this whole thing with my wife, talking about it. She goes, "It's connection, Mike." I was like, "Oh, perfect. That's the third C." So she came up with connection. It was not my word.
I love it. Copyright Stephanie.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, "Oh yeah, connection." I was like, "How can I not see connections? Perfect, the third C." But so the idea of connection is just that, right? It's an important third pillar of our educational experience here. We really do believe that a fully orbed experience is something that goes beyond just the competency and just the personal development. It's about lifelong relationships and building your network and walking through your educational journey together and beyond that. You guys know I talk about inquiry through alumni, and for us at the Institute, this is what we believe in. We believe from the moment you inquire to the moment you graduate, and even into your postgraduate life, we want to be a partner with you, and not just some kind of distant partner. We want to be somebody who is there for you and walks with you and continues to provide value and continues to speak into your life and do life together. We're relational beings, right? We were designed. We know that it's not good for man to be alone. So God made Eve, and he always meant for mankind to have a relationship with each other and to grow in relationship. And that's obviously big part of it. So that's where the connection comes from. It was always there. We just didn't have a word for it. And we didn't really understand that we should call it out as a third pillar. But I do think it rounds out in a real concrete way what we're trying to do at the Townsend Institute. One of our values is that we're relational, not transactional. This isn't just you pay us and we give you the knowledge and you move on and get a degree. We're looking to build a life journey with you. And even in our new kickoff conference, it's about embracing the journey and how we can walk with you as you grow.
Absolutely, Mike. And like you said, those 3 C's really stick with us in all of our events, all of our conferences, and on the curriculum side. Every time we're building classes, we're considering all 3 of those C's. You have shared just so much information with us today and given us a glimpse as to what it's like to be the leader of our remote team. It's certainly not an easy job, but we certainly have the right man in the saddle for it. So we certainly appreciate you. We like to end each episode with, if you could sum up what you've shared with us here today into one takeaway tip, as here we are on the Townsend Institute podcast, what would that takeaway tip be?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think in some ways it depends on who the audience is. Like a manager tip might be different than an employee tip might be different than somebody in leadership considering systems and whether or not they're going to move remote or not. But probably the tip that would be for all of them, it comes down to boundaries and understanding it's okay to have some flexibility in your life, and remote helps you do that. But also, you are not the job, right? You have a life and there's things outside of that, and that hopefully you don't tilt one way or the other, where you have to be able to integrate all this to where you have the best experience, the best way you can lead your family, the best way you can contribute to the organization, the best way you can grow yourself, the best person you can be is to balance all of these things and keep some good boundaries around work life and integrating well, because it can, for all the benefits of remote, it can have some negative effects, and you have to be aware of that, and you have to put in some things in place to keep you from going down that path. But ultimately, I believe in remote work. You guys know this. I think people do really well when you empower them, you give them a vision, and you say, let's do something fun together. Let's do something that's going to make a change. You find the right people and you build something fun. So that would be my tip: is have some kind of boundaries and balance in this new environment we're living.
I love it. Thank you so much, Mike, again for being with us here today. We appreciate everything you shared.
I bet to come back anytime, so you guys know how to reach me.
We'll hold you to that. We'll come knocking at your door.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Special thanks to Gadesla Bawa, CUI alumni, for the Tips Podcast music. If you enjoyed the Townsend Institute Podcast Series, head to our website, cui.edu/Townsend, to find out more about the certificates or bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degrees offered through Concordia University, Irvine. With programs in organizational psychology, mental health counseling, executive coaching consulting, and organizational leadership, we have a variety of faith-based programs dedicated to helping you fulfill your academic and professional goals, all while further developing your competence and character. Again, that's cui.edu/Townsend.